Hey everyone, Tim here from Two and Change. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably wondering, where is my new episode? I would like to tell you that we took the week off, but somebody spilled beer on the soundboard. That's right, No, I'm lying to you. We just took the week off, even though Josh has come close to spilling beer on the board many times. Anyway, enjoy this moldy old repeat where we discuss the minimum wage and the potential increase. And here's an update for you. Guess what? The economy didn't crash. Enjoy the show. The views expressed in the following podcasts are not the opinions of our employers, spouses, friends, and probably our sober selves. This show is full of bad language and misinformed drunken opinions. If you keep listening, you may be driven to drink yourself. Your mileage may vary. Welcome to Two and Change, the Canadian podcast with a 2-drink minimum. The drinking is real, the people are real, and the opinions, unfortunately, are also real. On this week's show, we discuss the movement to increase minimum wage. Every province and territory in Canada has done it within the past few years, as have many U.S. states. While putting more money in the pockets of workers, many businesses see this as a controversial move. What is the role of the government, private sector, and public opinion in all this? Well, let's get a drink and talk about it.
Hello everyone, I'm Josh and I am drinking a Shchevenko 9 Ukrainian Dunkel, I think I'm saying that right, Euro Dark Lager. It is very sweet and I like it.
My name is Mike. I am drinking a Ballantine's blended Scotch whiskey. Despite all of my pretentious snobbery to the contrary on previous episodes, I'm going to give it a try and I will judge it later after I tell you how it is.
Very nice. And this is Tim, and I am drinking Megadeth's beer. So Unibrew apparently teamed up with Megadeth to make Tout le Monde, and there's a picture of Megadeth on the front. I assume that's... I've never met them in person.
Entire thing I just said about being classy with my Scotch completely doesn't apply anymore.
Okay, so say something like farm ale. It's classy looking, and it tastes all right. I don't know.
Something about a French Quebecois brewery in Megadeth, just I don't know. That's a clash of cultures that I can't wrap my head around. I'm drinking a German Ukrainian beer that's produced in Ontario, so
I'm trying to imagine right now like a death metal band singing anything in French. Like I'm trying to picture like that growling, screaming thing in French.
I had a prof at Western who taught my logic course who was in a angry screamo band in Quebec. It was fully French.
Really?
French screamo. Yeah. What would that even sound like? I mean, it would sound the same thing as anything else, I suppose.
Well, you always think screamo, like Swedish or German. Those are the two ones that you think of.
Yeah. Or I think of, Insane Clown Posse and these people down the stage.
Oh, that's not scream metal.
Well, no.
That's called trailer trash.
Yeah.
What?
Okay. Yeah.
Whoop whoop ninja. I don't know.
I got nothing.
Anyway, hey Josh, what are we talking about today?
We're actually talking about nothing even related to any of that. What we talking about is we shared, I can't remember who shared it initially, but shared an article on tipping from the Toronto Star. And also I once saw a poll on what is considered a good tip, and it maxed out at 18%, which I just found kind of wrong because I generally don't tip below 20% unless the service is terrible. But even then I still tip because often it's not the server's fault. So that led us to sort of discuss minimum wage, and basically minimum wage being connected to paying a server a decent wage and kind of getting rid of this whole tip idea in general, maybe.
It's an interesting thought. I like that poll, the one that talks about how it caps out at 18%, because it makes me feel like a pretty good person. Because I also...
because you're not.
Yeah, I am very much not. My only job here is to be a good influence on you two.
You are failing miserably, my friend.
Yes, I am.
pretty bad,
You two are
pretty bad.
influencing me in a very real way. No, but my standard go-to is 20% on a tip, and that's part of because I understand that in a free and open society where people are free to sell the goods of their labor for whatever amount they are willing to sell it for, that they can rely on the quality of their work to help to demonstrate their level of income. How about that?
Josh, you want to take this one first?
Oh, dear Lord.
Where do you even begin with that?
Yeah. You know Jesus was a socialist, right?
No.
Anyways, I think where I'm going to start with that, though, is, I do...
Yea, I shall heal the lepers, provided they can meet their deductible. Come unto me.
Exactly.
I don't really know where to start with that because there are segments of that I agree with in the sense of that I think if you're doing a decent job, you should get tipped. Now the premise
That's not your job. Your job is to disagree with everything I say. I'm the libertarian. You're the Nazi.
my job is don't you try to
Wait, what? That's not
Whoa! This took a dark path. This went quickly into the internet comment sections of YouTube in like 3 seconds. No, So sort of on the idea of tipping, I actually believe that you're sort of right there, and especially when it comes to the tipping itself. Now, the premise of tipping, I think, is an archaic idea. We really have moved. Much of Europe has moved past tipping. It's mostly not a common practice.
Gonna raise my hand here. It's not actually that archaic, and here's why. Thank you, Adam Ruins Everything, because I quote that thing a lot, but I get a lot of dubious knowledge on the internet from this guy. So apparently tipping actually started in the Great Depression as a way they can lower. So tipping was always kind of there, but as far as it being custom in restaurants to tip, that really started as a Great Depression reaction to the fact they could no longer sell booze to make up their wages. So in order to keep people employed, what they would do is that they would actually lower the wages and have them work for tips in order to, supplement things.
Is that basically how they took it away from being a thing done for prostitution and into what we now call mainstream society?
No, prostitution was just the tip. That's different.
I completely set that up. I have no idea what I was thinking.
That was pretty good. That was not on purpose.
When I'm given the tip, that's on purpose.
Yeah.
Well, no, the idea behind the tip, though, and this is why, yes, I'm not an asshole. I'm not. I tip 18 to 20% unless one, it's a fucking coffee and it's not complicated. I don't tip that because I can pour my own coffee. I can't steam my own milk, so I tip on lattes a bit or something like that.
To be fair, they can't steam your milk either. There's a $5,000 machine behind the counter that does that for them.
They push the button.
They do. Yeah.
They risk the burn.
Yeah.
But my whole thing is with tipping is that why is it up to me to supplement a private business's wages, and why should it be that this has become a common arrangement in 2017 that I should rely on people's good graces to make money as opposed to saying, hey, just pay me, you cheap fucker?
Yeah, because under that premise of you have labor and you do, like you said before, you do your work and you're paid for quality of your work and quality of your labor, shouldn't that duty lie with your employer, not with the patron? Because the patron has a responsibility to pay the restaurant, and the restaurant is providing that ambiance. And then the requirement for the restaurant owner is to pay its employees for a good service done. So that would work down to a wage, not a tip, and a good solid wage for a good job. And serving is getting hard. I don't think servers make anywhere near enough. I don't know how people smile when their kids are destroying the table and the lady's yelling at them that they had the wrong order even though they asked for that. Like
Stories from Josh at a restaurant.
No, stories from Josh as a server when he was in high school. God.
Well, but hold on a minute, though. And I can even almost get behind the idea that you should be paid a fair wage for what you do, because any customer-facing role, you deal with stuff like that. I just came from my job where I get yelled at by people, and I don't get tips at my job because it's phone-based. And I get that. People aren't going to send me money through the phone. Your service was so great today. Thanks, I guess. Send your check to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, care of.
Are we still doing that?
I don't know if we are.
We have new equipment. It's a new show.
By the way, about that, Tim, Josh, you both sound absolutely delightful this evening.
You sound delightful as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wonder if it has something to do with this thing in front of my face that makes me feel so much more professional.
That's my penis, Mike.
No.
And you killed it.
The professionality of the show has now significantly decreased due to Tim's comment.
There you go. Send your complaint letters to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Yes, we are still doing that bit. Should we tell them
my penis?
Should we tell them what we're using? I mean, because those who are listening to the first few episodes are not. They are suddenly aware that we're now not acting as if we're yelling at one microphone across the table like we were.
Yeah, well, we broke down and we invested in some equipment here. We have a Behringer mixing board. We've got a couple of mics with pop screens, all that fun stuff. We've got an analog digital converter going to the computers that's working as our DAC.
Fancy stuff, tech stuff. It sounds really good.
It sounds good. Well, let's wait for the finished product here and let's play with it a bit. But I think it's definitely a step up in quality. And hey, I do appreciate anyone who's been listening to us thus far and sticking it throughout.
For those curious, it's a Samsung brand microphone apparently.
Samson,
not Samsung, cell phone company. No, Samson, as in, I don't know, strong guy from the Bible.
Before we get back to the minimum wage, though, 23% of South Korea's GDP is based off of Samsung.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Well, Samsung makes everything. They make car engines. They make boats.
Hold up. What?
They make parts for fighter jets.
Yeah, South Korea. I just was reading a report for my job with infrastructure and opportunities for partnerships and stuff. But anyways, 23% of their GDP is produced from Samsung. So if Samsung ever leaves South Korea, they are royally screwed.
They'd almost have to, I don't know, go and employ the North Koreans again.
I mean...
Again?
Again.
Okay,
Once upon a time.
Anyway, that's enough of a diversion there. Part of our new spiel is that we want to keep on track a bit too, so...
Maybe behave a little bit less like three drunk guys around a table. That will never go away.
Even though we are.
Speak for yourself.
Three drunk guys with ADD around a table.
I am heavily medicated for that, okay?
Oh, boy. No, so kind of getting back to the whole tipping thing and everything like that. My whole thing is that... Okay, now society says that to not be an asshole, you have to tip 18-20%. My thing, though, is that why, and again, kind of reiterating, why is it up to me to supplement those wages? And because society says that we have to keep paying ever-increasing percentages, it's allowed businesses to get away with not paying a fair wage to their workers. So the reality is that we, on the public side, are being expected to supplement the wages of a business owner who, one, will not increase their prices, or two, will not take a cut of their profit. And to me, if you're talking about private enterprise, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And that's where I come down to minimum wage too, because if we're not forcing businesses to pay a reasonable wage, then how are those people living? They are living basically because they're living off of some sort of government assistance at some point, a lot of them. So why should government be subsidizing the wages of a workforce of a profitable company, Mr. Libertarian?
Pick your poison. The idea basically comes down to they're either going to get government assistance because they're getting government assistance because the wage that they have is too low, so they're applying for whatever government benefits they can get, or you increase the minimum wage. Now more people are on government assistance because the price of everything has gone up.
Not true.
So
one, the research backs that for the most part it doesn't.
Your research backs that.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so let's take research out of it.
Reading Atlas Shrugged is not research, Mike.
So let's take the sociological and economical data that backs up my statement. Let's put that to the side for a second.
Good.
So let's look at the fact. Okay. Fine. Say some businesses do raise their prices, which they do if the wages come up. And that is true.
They will.
Some.
Yes.
Some will also be smart and realize that they keep their prices the same and create a larger, broader audience while some are rising their prices. That's how the economy works. So it's not as if you just, so sure, somebody will raise their hamburger 25 cents, but one guy will leave his hamburger at 20, will leave it at 20 cents, and that 20 cent, I mean, I don't know where you're getting a 20 cent hamburger.
I was going to say.
But one guy,
Where are you eating, John?
That's not a hamburger.
It's 75% real beef, okay?
Okay.
And beef is in quotes.
Somebody will leave their hamburger at 20 cents. And that person will gain a greater market share. So it's not as if, and people will be able to afford that because they're having a wage that has sustained them. Yes, eventually, the inflation will rise to a point where we have to look at raising minimum wage again, and you have a gradual inflation, and that's a problem. However, based on our current economy, based on our current solution basis, raising minimum wage makes sense because we haven't raised it in the province of Ontario for a long time, and same for many states. So we have to bring something up to sort of a fair living wage, because in the province of Ontario, $11.25 is definitely not high enough. And the other side of it is, yes, okay, minimum wage, I get you, will create inflation. There's no doubt about that. Over time, that becomes a problem. And the solution is minimum wage. Yes. My personal feeling and what I think is the better and larger solution above minimum wage is definitely a basic income of some sort. How that looks, I don't know. I think that's the way to go. However, and now that one on basic income has interesting agreement on both the left and the right.
Yeah.
So it's not
You'll
just
find some grudging agreement from even me on that.
Well, I mean, the idea behind basic income.
I know. It's
I
like
got
I
the
just
libertarian to agree me from a left argument.
Hold up.
What is happening?
I can appreciate that GBI is eventually something that we're going to have to at some point look at from the perspective of technology, not from the perspective of government policy. What I can tell you about the minimum wage piece you're talking about, I appreciate everything you said about the burger guy. I'm not talking about the burger guy. I'm talking about someone who's in a service industry that has nothing to do with the minimum wage, but will start to have something to do with the minimum wage because he was earning $15 an hour, which provided him with almost, or you could say being a single guy living in an apartment somewhere, did provide him with a living wage, and now doesn't. Because now he's making minimum wage. TD's economist was speaking about this when he was asking who's some mutual fund manager. He was talking about this
Sorry,
exact
for our
thing.
listeners, TD is Toronto Dominion Bank, one of the major banking institutions in Canada. Please continue, Mike.
Thank you very much. Yep, actually in North America.
It's like it's the
America.
largest in the States now too.
Yep.
So I will get.
But it was one of the interesting things. Like he's one of the portfolio fund managers out there, and I'm into finance, so I actually follow this stuff pretty closely. He basically said that the demographic of people who are earning minimum wage now is mostly people between the ages of 18 and 25. Like it should be. When you change it to 15, suddenly there's going to be a massive swath of people in the middle-age category earning minimum wage.
I'm definitely going to interject there. I've seen different economists say different things on that, and I've actually seen the majority are of the working adult age, not 18 to 25, actually much above, and the majority of them are single mothers. So I actually would challenge that.
Okay, so here's a question. I think we're kind of tap dancing around this question.
We are, yes.
How much is appropriate for minimum wage? Because do you agree at the bare minimum there should be a minimum wage?
That's an interesting question for a libertarian to answer.
I know.
I want to know the answer, though.
Because here's the thing. There are libertarians that would tell you that there should not be one at all. Now, if you were asking me this question 75 years ago, that's where I would fall, that there should not be one at all, because in a free market, someone should be allowed to sell their labor for whatever they want. However, I'm also a pragmatist, and in this day and age, yeah, I believe there does need to be a minimum wage because we've trained our society to be dependent on one. And therefore, should there be one? Yes. Should it be higher than $11 an hour? Yeah, probably.
Okay, so
but we need to start working more toward then your guaranteed income benefit.
Well, to your point, saying at what that, the individual should be free to sell labor, sure, but that assumes that there's some sort of parity between the labor and the work and the employer.
And that's the whole problem with our society, is that there is no parity. The reason why there's no parity is because
we bust the unions.
Is because of so much regulation that prevents people from getting into business. Look, if I have a service, you know what, here, I'll give you a perfect example. Uber. What a beautiful company Uber is. I have a car, you need a ride. That's literally all you should need to start a business. And then here comes government and taxi companies saying, we want millions.
Hold on a second, though. I mean, you have a car, I want a ride. But I want to make sure, one, you're not a rapist, and two, your car is not going to blow up halfway to drop my children off. I want to make sure you're not drunk. I want to make sure you have a valid license. Who the hell's going to do that if not the government?
You are.
I'm going to vet every single person.
So you as an individual are going to, you're going to vet the car insurance, the individual's background check. You're also going to come up with all the other intricacies of Uber. Also, in an unregulated economy, before you go there, you're going to have a drink, and you're going to expect everything that has possibly ever come from this drink. The quality of food you're going to expect.
I can make this a lot easier for you.
You can't. It's not possible.
So regulation has to happen. Yes.
No, I can make this a lot easier than that with Uber and that sort of thing. The problem is that the only way for free market to function and weed that shit out is people gotta die. Because think about it. Because if the free market is really going to make its choice... No, hold on a second. Hold on.
Josh is shrugging his shoulders and going, maybe.
Well, but here's the problem, right? So let's say we get rid of those regulations. Now, libertarian idea would say that, the market will sort out who's going to be the winners and who's going to be the losers. Now, if they're going to be unregulated, I want to take the more regulated companies. I want to take the companies that are guaranteeing that their people are going to be safe. Problem is, how do we know who's safe and how do we know who's lying? The one where people didn't get killed. So where do we say that, maybe we shouldn't let it get quite that far?
So you are mistaking minarchist libertarian, meaning minimal government, for anarchist libertarian, which is not the same thing.
Minimum is what I just said. And that's what cities are asking, because that was the whole point behind the taxi industry being regulated.
Yeah, but when the taxi industry gets regulated, I get why they did that, but that is not quite the same thing as demanding that for you to have a taxi, you need to come up with $1 million just to have a taxi? Are you out of your mind?
Okay. The taxi coins issue got out of hand and became a whole racket. That's
Find me one government-regulated program that the government regulated and also administered that did not get out of hand.
Post office.
Are you kidding me?
Okay, look, we can go on this for quite a while.
We certainly could.
But if we can bring it back to the whole idea of, because I did ask previously. So if we all conceptually agree that in today's society, for whatever reason, minimum wage has to exist.
Yes, it does.
Then what should we define as an appropriate minimum wage? So, like the basic income conversation aside. Like, what do we think if we're going to say you have to pay your worker at least X, what should X be?
That X will always be a fluctuating number. And the reason I say that is because we're in a country right now, in a currency right now, where the currency is not backed by a precious metal. And as such, inflation is always going to be a thing. You can't have a minimum wage. It has to be something that's matched to the cost of living.
Dear God, please don't. Hold on. Please don't tell me that you think that backing our
No. We're not going down the fiat currency roll.
Okay, all right, that's fine. We won't go down there.
No, but I actually agree.
Fine.
I actually agree with what you're saying, because actually Ontario, if you look at what the regulation said, we're going up to $15 an hour, then it's pegged to CPI.
Which, you know what, if we must have
Consumer
a minimum
Price
wage,
Index.
I'm totally okay with it. I wish they had just pegged it to CPI from where it is, but it's not. If they're going to bump it to 15 and then peg it to CPI, fine. We'll find a way to adapt.
I think 15 is reasonable, because I don't think that the jump from 12 to 15. Again, I'm not because we have a very famous small business owner here in London who likes to post, thanks Kathleen Wynne, that's our premier, signs out about the whole minimum wage thing. I'm gonna go broke. Well, you're going broke actually. Sorry, bro, because your food sucks. And really, if you're going broke selling beer, You got bigger problems
Hold
with your
on.
business.
How does somebody go broke selling beer?
I don't know.
It's beer.
You
It
know what?
sells
The profit-
itself.
The profit margins are pretty low, but the one problem with the minimum wage that I have coming from sort of left side is it's actually very regressive. So is minimum wage is not universal for location, right? So $15 an hour may work. $15 an hour may work in London, Ontario. You can probably live at least a subsistence. You can live. You can maybe go and get a Tim Hortons coffee and it not be taking like medicine from your child. But you can't live on $15 an hour in Toronto.
No, you cannot.
Right? So the minimum wage, I think, should also have some sort of geographic base based on the local economy, because that really shifts on what. If you're in Sudbury, if you're in like.
Sudbury's expensive.
Yeah, Sudbury's
Yeah.
actually expensive. If you're in like.
Timmins.
Yeah, Timmins or like Owen Sound. Sorry, Owen Sound.
We love you.
Or Tilsonburg. Let's use Tilsonburg.
Yeah, $15 an hour is actually going to go a lot further. And it's actually not a terrible wage. It's not the best, but it's not terrible. So it's really dependent on where it is.
Well, and this is why I would support something like the province sets a baseline, and a region or a municipality has the power to, like, I'll use an example: California and San Francisco. San Francisco increased their minimum wage, for example. Now, I see you smiling there, Mike, because the problem
Decentralized government. Yay!
Okay, so you know what? It's something I will agree with somewhat with the libertarian in the room is in Ontario and actually many provinces as well. But I'll speak for Ontario specifically because I know it better. The Municipal Act does not allow municipalities to do that. City of Toronto has some sort of because they have the sort of Toronto Act. They have some sort of move. Yeah, they're special. They don't have the ability to make
Toronto.
Yeah, they don't have the ability to create things like their own minimum wage, whereas a lot of the cities in the States do. Mayors have a lot more power. It's a little bit different down there. I'm for that in many ways. I think cities have a better way of utilizing their money across the board, and they understand their local economies, and giving them the power to adjust for that, as long as it doesn't go below a sort of larger threshold.
So basically what I said, set a baseline, and if municipalities feel it needs to be increased, that's fine. But I would not give them the power to decrease.
I would love to do that. I'd love to see that in Ontario, but the reality is that's not going to happen because we have to change the Municipal Act, and that's a lot.
I'm okay with that.
I guess the biggest thing that I'm uncomfortable with about this idea of we have to make it a living wage for everybody is that there's got to be some kind of definition placed on there. I'm okay with it. You mentioned single mothers. Okay, good. We have got to do something to make sure that we're taking very good care of our single mothers so that they can raise these kids so that they can become productive members of society someday. I get it. I don't think the minimum wage is the best way to do that. We need another social safety net for that situation.
But we have these social safety nets.
Right.
We have GST rebates. We've got the so-called baby bonus.
Right.
We've got a lot. Now the problem is, and then we start getting in, but the problem is we start getting back into these things about the inefficiencies, and that's where sometimes a guaranteed basic income makes a little bit more sense.
It almost starts to because of how complex it gets. My point here is that there is this concept in libertarianism, which is not always right, where there's this something called an entry-level wage. There is a very big difference between a single mom struggling to raise 3 kids and an 18-year-old kid out of high school. They do not need the same level of income. That 18-year-old kid deserves less than someone who's raising the next generation.
Hold on a second.
Nothing. This is a real thing.
No. Let's take your premise that the 18-year-old quote unquote deserves less, and if they're starting at a lower wage, that 18-year-old could be a single mother. 2, so let's not forget that.
Well, I don't think he meant the single mother in that. I think he's talking about.
I understand that. But so also that 18-year-old may be producing at a level that is much higher than somebody who's 45 and has years of experience.
Yeah.
And that's also assuming that people leave their own wage bracket. They leave this minimum wage. That's a false assumption. People stay in that minimum wage bracket sometimes for their entire lives.
That's what the rest of the social safety net is for. What I'm saying is that we don't need to take the entire minimum wage and raise the entire thing at that entire expense to the entire province, because some people might not leave that bracket. Create a different social net for those people. Because I get that they are needed. I understand that we're in a world where technology is increasing to a point where we're going to have more and more and more automation in our society, and therefore more and more people are simply never going to be able to hold down the types of jobs that we need. Fine. We increased and we broadened what the definition of disabled means. We have a social net for that.
Well, but the thing is, and this is where I kind of come up with the problem, though, when you have like a highly profitable company, like say like Tim Hortons or like McDonald's or other companies, let's say a lot of call centers, basically slumlords on this one too. Other companies accepted. The people who might know us might know what we're talking about here. But the thing is that the problem is that by setting a minimum wage, you are basically telling them that it is okay to pay this amount of money. And you can basically make this as part of your corporate profit structure. Now, if you're talking about the social safety net, now how come a private entity can rely on basically government subsidized labor at that point? Because at that point, if you are not paying a living wage to a person, then that private company is now relying on government subsidized labor, which, I mean, even left, right, center, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a private company to be benefiting from that.
I get it, and I appreciate the argument, and the problem I have with the argument is this thing that you call living wage. Because an 18-year-old single guy with no family responsibilities, his definition of a living wage is very different than the 18-year-old young woman with 2 kids at home.
Okay, but if your entire premise is based on a living wage being based on a sort of let's say we're going with our ideal here, and the minimum wage, quote unquote, is in a regional municipality. So say Toronto has $18 an hour or something. Okay, so if somebody's doing the equal work, should they not get equal pay? Isn't that like the basis of libertarianism?
Are you talking about are you now talking about like man versus woman thing?
No. I'm talking about regardless of gender
equal
or
work
age,
for equal pay.
Equal work for equal pay
ideal.
Across the board. It doesn't matter sex, gender, race, all of that doesn't matter. So if an 18-year-old and a 35-year-old are doing the same basic work, should they not get the same money? And under that series, if the 18-year-old is making more money than he needs, could he not stock that away, invest in things, make money, grow the economy?
He could.
Okay, so what's wrong with that?
Nothing really. Except I'm worried about what it would do to the rest of the economy if you take that kind of money away from the places that would invest it.
No, they're not investing. They're taking, because what they're saying is like there's this whole myth, and I can go an entire podcast on this one. Basically, it's the job creator myth that somehow their trickle down benevolence will come down and bless us all. I can think of one thing trickling down, and it ain't
benevolence, and it ain't
benevolence.
Bless you, Saint Ronald Reagan.
Bless you, Saint. May your trickle-down benevolence bless us all.
I think if you want to get that joke, I think it's in the second episode. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
on somebody's Twitter podcast somewhere.
Twitter podcast.
Yeah, Twitter. That's not the right word. Hang on, I can brain today. We didn't put a single thing up on our Twitter feed for this podcast.
I can't brain. I have the dumb.
There it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think that's about all the time we have for this week's episode.
We do.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep talking in the bonus here, but of course, this is our 5th episode, and of course, we're evolving not only in, of course, recording qualities everyone can hear. I know, right? But also our formats slipping. So we do want to thank you for you, the audience here, for sticking out with us this far. And hey, I mean, look, it only goes uphill from here, right, guys?
How could it not?
Gravity.
Okay. And of course, regardless of how you, the audience, feel about this issue, we'd love to hear what you think. Find us on Facebook or Twitter at 2 and Change. And for 2 and Change, I'm Tim.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Josh.
We'll try and see you next week. Bye-bye. Okay, guys, so what do you think of the new stuff?
I thought that was fantastic. Look at this recording software.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm just excited it's only with a robot piece, that's all.
No. See, there's still a robot penis, but now it has a windscreen and